NASA has confirmed that a microscopic floating fern can outpace a forest by producing oxygen 50 times faster than trees per acre. Deep within the earth at 10,000 feet, a signal from the past shows that this plant once triggered a global cooling event that saved the planet. Today, this plant is called a noxious weed and is illegal to grow in nearly half of the United States. This biological powerhouse can clean wastewater and feed animals for free, which is exactly why it has been suppressed for decades. Reclaiming this lost knowledge is the key to a sustainable future in 2025. Deep beneath the freezing layers of the Arctic ice, researchers found something at 10,000 feet that simply should not be there. A geological record preserved in the ice core samples revealed a layer of tiny plants called Azolla, a floating water fern that looks like a small green carpet on the surface of a pond. This wasn't just any fossil layer. It was evidence of a biological engine that once covered the entire planet and literally changed the climate. NASA has spent years studying this tiny weed, and the results are mind-blowing. In the 1980s and the 1990s, NASA tested this species for space travel and for farming on other planets. They found that it produces oxygen through sunlight 50 times faster than trees do on the same amount of land. But it does not just make air. The technical data shows that this plant is a biological masterpiece. A single acre of Azolla can pull 50 tons of carbon dioxide out of the air every single year. It also fixes nitrogen, which means it makes its own fertilizer by pulling nitrogen straight out of the atmosphere through a special relationship with bacteria living inside its leaves. This hidden partnership allows the plant to do something almost no other plant can do on its own. Here is where it gets insane. This plant doubles its weight every 2 to 5 days. If you start with 1 pound of Azolla, you could have 32 pounds in just a couple of weeks. The plant is so efficient that it can remove 90% of the pollution from wastewater in a matter of days. It strips out heavy metals, drugs, and excess nutrients that cause toxic algae blooms. The research data from NASA shows that the plant is 30% protein, which is just as good as soy for feeding animals. Instead of needing massive tractors and chemicals, it simply floats on top of dirty water and grows for free. The chamber seal on the core samples showed that 49 million years ago, this plant grew so much that it covered the entire Arctic Ocean. It pulled so much carbon out of the sky that it cooled the Earth by nearly 20 degrees. This is known as the Azolla Event, the original climate control system for the planet. Scientists call it an invasive species today. It is so good at surviving, it can take over a pond in a weekend. In 24 states, it is a crime to even have this plant in your possession. You can get a ticket or even go to jail for growing something that NASA says is the most efficient oxygen producer on the planet. Think about that for a second. We are spending billions of dollars on high-tech machines to suck carbon out of the air when this tiny fern has been doing it for millions of years. It is a biological technology that was buried in the mud and then buried again by the law. But why was this solution suppressed for so long? This is not just a story about a plant. It is a story about the suppression of a technology that threatens the way we make money. In the 1930s and the 1940s, the world moved toward chemical fertilizers and massive water treatment plants. These are multi-billion-dollar industries. Fertilizer companies sell $200 billion worth of products every year. Water treatment is a $50 billion industry. A plant that grows for free and makes its own fertilizer is a direct threat to those profits. If every farmer could grow their own fertilizer in a pond for free, the big companies would lose everything. If every city could clean its water using a floating fern instead of expensive chemicals, the treatment plants would go out of business. This is why the plant was suddenly labeled a noxious weed. Laws were written to make it illegal to move the plant across state lines. Officials used the claim that it was an invasive species that destroys ecosystems. NASA research shows the plant actually helps ecosystems by removing the very pollution that causes dead zones. The suppression began in the 1970s and the 1980s, when laws started to change. They took a plant that farmers in Asia had used for 1,500 years, and they turned it into a criminal. The public was told it was dangerous and that it would ruin our lakes. They did not say that it was one of the few things that could repair the damage we are doing to the atmosphere. They buried the technology because it could not be monetized. You cannot sell something that reproduces itself for free every 3 days. You cannot put a meter on a pond and charge people for the oxygen the plants are making. The green solution was locked away behind legal red tape and scary labels. The world was told to keep planting trees, even though trees take decades to grow and pull carbon much more slowly. We were sold a version of environmentalism that still required us to buy things from large corporations. The consequences of this suppression have been devastating for the planet. By keeping this plant illegal, the world lost decades of progress. Dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico have grown by 20% because of chemical runoff that this plant could have cleaned for free. We are losing the battle against carbon dioxide because we are using the wrong tools. Trees are beautiful and important, but they take decades to grow and cannot match the speed of this water fern. The economic cost is staggering. Farmers are stuck in a cycle of buying expensive nitrogen every year, and that nitrogen often ends up poisoning the water. This plant could have broken that cycle 50 years ago. Instead, we are seeing food prices rise and soil quality drop. The lost opportunity to use this plant as animal feed is also a massive blow. We grow enormous amounts of corn and soy, using huge amounts of water and land, when we could have grown high-protein fern biomass on waste ponds. But the technology still exists, and research locations are studying it today. Even though it is illegal for a regular person to grow it in many places, university labs and government agencies are still watching. They know how powerful it is. In China and Vietnam, the plant is still used to boost rice yields and feed ducks. In the United States, small pockets of research ponds remain where scientists measure how fast these ferns can clean heavy metals from old mines. Some of the most advanced research is happening in places you would not expect. Private labs are exploring how to turn this biomass into biofuel that could replace oil. They are trying to find a way to make it profitable so that the laws will finally change. The biology of the plant is still broadcasting its potential, waiting to be rediscovered by the public. The modern world is finally starting to notice that the old way of doing things is failing. We are reaching a point where we can no longer afford to keep the most effective solution illegal. The hidden research is beginning to leak into public view, and people are asking why this plant is treated like a controlled substance. Will you choose a free natural solution or a costly artificial one to save our planet? Tell us your thoughts below and subscribe to help us reclaim this lost knowledge today.